Full-on brawls in the playoffs, a manager fired 4 different times by the same team, a sudden mid-season death, and a star player missing a World Series game because of a hemorrhoid. The late 1970s witnessed one of the most electrifying rivalries in Major League Baseball between the New York Yankees and the Kansas City Royals. This period was a battleground where storied tradition met rising ambition, with the Yankees embodying decades of baseball dominance and the Royals emerging as a formidable new contender. These two teams met each other in the American League Championship Series 4 times in a span of 5 years, and formed a war that epitomized the spirit and competitiveness of baseball in that era. This was, most certainly, baseball's best forgotten rivalry. The year is 1976. America is celebrating its bicentennial anniversary. Silly Love Songs by Paul McCartney and the Wings is the #1 song. Jimmy Carter is elected as the 39th president, and the Ford Pinto exploded onto the scene as the best-selling car. The Yankees are a team synonymous with baseball, intertwined with its history. Old championship rosters filled with greats like Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Berra. This franchise embodied the spirit of winning, the spirit of being a champion. But the Yankees heading into 1976 had not been good in a long time. The team had not been to the World Series since 1964. 11 years had passed since the Bronx Bombers won the final game of the year, their longest World Series drought at the time. The fans had not seen the winning, championship Yankees that they had come to expect from the past. Over the years of their World Series absence, they were just barely over 500. It seemed as though their winning history was behind them entering the 1976 season. The Kansas City Royals did not have the championship valor of the Yankees. They were the new kids on the block in Major League Baseball and were coming off their first winning season in franchise history. The Royals were a part of a 1969 expansion that added 4 teams. Before the Royals, Kansas City was home to the Kansas City A's, who moved there from Philadelphia in 1955, only to leave again in 1967. Since expansion, the new Royals had played poor baseball. Their franchise record leading into 1976 was just below 500. But like I said, 1975 was their first winning season, and they finished 90-72. That was good enough for second place in the American League West. Baseball used to be an insanely difficult sport to make the playoffs. Before 1969, only 2 teams advanced from the regular season. Teams played all summer long to try to win their league's pennant. Only the first place team from both the National League and the American League would advance to the World Series. The 1969 expansion not only introduced 4 new teams, but also split up each league into 2 divisions. Now, the first place teams of each division would play their league's counterpart in the league championship series that was best 3 out of 5. Heading into 1976, hope was high for the Royals. Hope that maybe 76 could be the year where they get a shot at the World Series. For the Yankees, they hoped to return to the World Series and restore their status in baseball history. The Royals in 1976 would lean heavily on their new young star, George Brett. In '74, Brett finished 3rd in American League Rookie of the Year voting, and he'd followed that year up, leading the American League in hits. In his 3rd year, George Brett would tie Pete Rose for the Major League lead in hits, lead the American League in batting average and triples, receive his first of 13 All-Star selections, and finish 2nd in American League MVP voting. The Royals had found themselves a young hitting machine and surrounded him with other key players like All-Star Amos Otis, who led the American League in doubles, and All-Star Hal McRae, who led the American League in on-base percentage. The Royals rode the excellent year from Brett and others to their first ever playoff appearance, finishing 90-72. In the American League East, the Yankees also had several stars bolstering their lineup. Newly appointed captain of the Yankees, Thurman Munson, was American League MVP, and Mickey Rivers led the team in batting average. The Yankees also had a good third baseman of their own. Greg Nettles, who led the American League in home runs, was a power hitter entering his 3rd year with the Yankees, fresh off an All-Star selection in 1975. The Bronx Bombers slugged their way to first place, finishing 97-62. Before meeting in the American League Championship Series, these 2 teams battled it out 13 times in the regular season, 7 of those games ending in the Royals' favor. Tensions were beginning to build between the two, as Yankees manager Billy Martin wasn't afraid to protest and argue anything that he could. On July 5, 1976, Martin, who was notorious for being fired as a Yankee skipper 4 times by owner George Steinbrenner, protested a 2-1 loss to the Royals because left fielder Hal McRae had too many warm-up throws. Yeah, you heard that right. After going to the outfield in the middle of an inning as a defensive substitution for an injured player, Martin was mad that McRae got more than the allotted amount of throws. An annoying tactic that Billy Martin frequently abused as a manager was to use any rule that he could to get a leg up in the game. As silly as it sounds, Martin was dead serious, saying, "That's a violation of the rules. That's the strongest protest I've ever seen." The opposing manager for the Royals, Whitey Herzog, responded, "That's a lot of baloney. I don't protest things that are common sense." It was clear that Martin's tactics were getting under the skin of the Royals, and it set the stage for their first date in October. George Brett was a formidable hitter, but his glove was not something he could brag about. The Yankees took Game 1 as a result of a pair of early errors by Brett, but that wasn't the story. George had a brother on the Yankees and had accused the New York front office of lying. Ken Brett, a left-handed pitcher, was looking to join his brother on the Royals via trade. According to George, Ken was told by the Yankees that the Royals had no interest in him, and when George confronted his own team, they told him that the Yankees wouldn't trade Ken. George went to the press saying, "Either Billy Martin is lying about it or my brother's lying, and my brother doesn't lie." Bad blood was brewing, so when Brett made his first error, he was berated by comments from the Yankees dugout. The Yanks ripped into him, saying the Royals would be better off with Ken Brett playing third base. Martin, after the game, said, "I wasn't the only one on him. My whole bench was on Brett and Gura." Gura was the Royals starting pitcher who was on the Yankees earlier in 1976 before being traded. Whenever Gura got in trouble on the mound, Martin would shout at him from the dugout, "Get the changeup over you, insert word here," causing Gura to call Martin's vocabulary typical low class after the game. As you can see, after one game, there was no love lost between these two teams. The Royals evened up the series in Game 2. It seems that karma came back around for the Yankees, who committed 5 errors on their way to a 7-3 loss. Down 3-0 in the first inning of Game 3, Yankee pitcher Doc Ellis, who was famous for throwing a no-hitter high on acid, settled in and did not allow a run. The Yankees were able to fight their way back and win the game after a 2-run home run by first baseman Chris Chambliss and then a go-ahead single by Greg Nettles. Once they had the lead, the Yankees never looked back. Down 2-1 in the series, Kansas City forced a winner-take-all Game 5 in New York. So it was all down to this. This Game 5 would be iconic as the two squads fought for a chance at the World Series. Kansas City was down 6-3 and were looking to rally in the top of the 8th inning. With 2 runners on, who else but George Brett came up to the plate as a tying run, and he did this.
Set a man up. High drive, hit to right field, home run. It's gone. There it is. The ball game is tied.
With one swing of the bat, Brett had quieted Yankee Stadium and had brought the Royals all the way back. Although the Royals had tied it up and were looking to win the game in extras, Chris Chambliss had other ideas, and he wasn't a fan of staying up late. Just like that, Chambliss had sent the Royals home and Yankee fans poured onto the field to celebrate, making one of the most iconic moments in Yankee Stadium history. The scene was so chaotic that Chambliss was not even able to touch home plate and had to be escorted back out after the riot calmed down just to touch home plate. Chambliss led the way for the Yankees, batting .524, socking 2 home runs and driving in 8. George Brett had a good series as well, batting .444 and hitting 1 home run, and driving in 5. The Yankees would go on to face the reigning champion Big Red Machine in the World Series, where they would eventually get swept. As the next year rolled around, both teams were hungry to get back to the playoffs. The Yankees had fallen just short of glory, and the Royals were 1 run away from winning the pennant. After starting 31-32, the Royals turned it on and won 102 games behind the bats of George Brett and Al Cowens. The Yankees also improved their record as they won 100 games. New York had 3 players drive in over 100 RBIs, and Nettles went deep 37 times. The Yankees hoped that the addition of Reggie Jackson would help them finally get back to being world champions. Although the Yankees were grooving on the field, they were dysfunctional off the field, as there were frequent clashes between players, manager Billy Martin, and owner George Steinbrenner. Somehow, the Royals got dragged into the Yankees' family problems. On August 29th, the Royals and Yankees matched up to finish a game that had been delayed and postponed earlier in the season because of rain. The Royals had 3 pitchers in their lineup that day as a protest for playing. Kansas City was mad that they were even playing that day. They believed that they could have finished the game on the original day after the rain, but the Yankees postponed the game in order to find out who their manager was. Allegedly, it was unknown if Billy Martin was fired or not by George Steinbrenner, so the Yankees decided to postpone the game while they sort out their dysfunctional situation. Obviously, this angered the Royals, who instead of having an off day, had to travel to New York and finish a game from earlier in the season. With the division at hand, Kansas City hilariously played pitchers in their lineup. New year, same old Yankees getting under Kansas City's skin. The season series in '77 was tied 5-5 and set up a rematch in October. A tough start for Yankee pitcher Don Gollett, who was battling a sore shoulder, and a trio of Kansas City home runs were enough to beat the Yankees in Game 1. Game 2 is where things got unsurprisingly heated. Hal McRae was the villain of the night. The Royals were down 2-1 in the top of the 6th. George Brett came up to bat with runners on first and second with one out. Hal McRae stood ready to go at first base. Brett grounds the pitch from Ron Guidry to third baseman Greg Nettles, who throws it to second base to go for a double play, and McRae was not going to let that happen. In the aftermath of McRae's football tackle, Freddie Patek scored the tying run. The Yankees argued for interference, but despite their best efforts, the play stood. A highlight from a different, hard-nosed era of baseball. Two teams that already hate each other were playing hard to get what they want. Willie Randolph said, "That's not baseball," and that the play was illegal. Billy Martin, who was a second baseman in his playing days, warned, "The last time a guy did that to me, I hit him in the mouth with the ball. That's no slide, that's a clip." Luckily for the Yankees, the game wouldn't be tied for long. After a double by Cliff Johnson scored Thurman Munson, the Yankees never looked back and won 6-2. The Royals were at home for Game 3 and had their ace, Dennis Leonard, on the mound. The 20-game winner pitched a gem for the Royals, tossing up a complete game and only allowing 4 hits. The high tension over McRae's rough play at second base from the game before was still in the air, and he was asked how he felt about the animosity from New York. McRae said, "I don't need to be loved by these players. I have a wife and 2 kids. That's enough love." In the other clubhouse, Billy Martin was getting no love from the Yankees owner George Steinbrenner, who was bringing up Martin's job into question. Steinbrenner, one loss away from elimination, called out his 3-star sluggers for underperforming. In Game 4, the Yankees had their back against the wall against a familiar face in Larry Gura. They were able to get an early lead off of Gura, but the Royals were also able to get to New York starter Ed Figueroa and keep the game close. Down 5-4 in the 4th inning, the Royals were threatening to take the lead with 2 on, 2 out, and George Brett up to bat. The Yankees went to their superstar reliever and Cy Young Award winner Sparky Lyle to save the season. Sparky got Brett to pop up, then proceeded to shut down Kansas City over the course of the next 5 innings, only allowing 2 hits along the way. The Yankees evened up the series, and Greg Nettles evened up the beef at second base. Almost identical to Hal McRae, Nettles flattened the second baseman Frank White while turning the double play. Signs that these two teams would hold on to a grudge and would do anything that it took to win. Tensions were boiling over entering Game 5. The Yankees and Royals had given each other everything they had 2 years in a row and found themselves in another winner-go-home situation, this time in Kansas City. Things got off to a heated start. After a Hal McRae single in the bottom of the 1st, George Brett lined a ball over the head of Mickey Rivers, and then the melee began. At first glance, it seems like it started out of nowhere, but on a second look, you can see Brett's elbow fly up and Nettles' foot hit Brett in the face. The 2 third basemen began to trade blows as Yankee starter Ron Guidry and Royals third base coach Steve Boros tried to break it up. It wasn't long before both benches cleared. The craziest thing about this is that nobody was ejected. Nettles and Brett both stayed in the game. Once the fight calmed down, the umpires told both third basemen that if they so much as said a word to the other, they would be thrown out. Game 5 was that important. The 2 players could have a boxing match mid-game, and they would not be thrown out as both teams would be without their key players. After the fight, the Royals led 1-0 and Al Cowan scored Brett with an RBI groundout. The Yankees superstar Reggie Jackson started Game 5 on the bench. Jackson was not in the lineup for the most important game of the season. This was because he was 1 for 14 in the ALCS, and the Royals had a lefty on the bump in Paul Splittorff who he struggled against. In the 8th inning, down 3-1 with a right-hander on the mound in relief for Splittorff, Billy Martin pinch hit Reggie Jackson. Despite his struggles, Reggie pulled through and brought the Yankees within 1. Now the Yanks were only down 1 run in the top of the 9th. The Royals were just 3 outs away from going to their first World Series. Things got off to a shaky start after a leadoff single was followed by a walk. Whitey Herzog then went to Larry Gura to shut it down. Unfortunately for Gura, it was like deja vu all over again. Mickey Rivers singled to right field to tie the game. Gura was taken out and replaced by Mark Littell. The Yankees didn't care as they tacked on 2 more runs after a sac fly and another error from George Brett. The score was 5-3. In the bottom of the 9th, Sparky Lyle shut the door and retired 3 straight to send the Yankees to their 2nd straight World Series. The Yankees, after being down the entire game, escaped with a victory, and the Royals, whose bullpen imploded late, took a gut punch of a loss from the team that they hated most. Mickey Rivers led the way for the Yankees, hitting .391, and Thurman Munson drove in 5 to help the Bombers. Sparky Lyle was a cheat code out of the bullpen, throwing 9 1/3 innings, only giving up 1 earned run. Despite their best efforts, George Brett, Hal McRae, and the rest of the Royals couldn't get past the Yankees for their 2nd straight year. They washed as the Yankees went on to defeat the Dodgers in 6 games, winning their first World Series since 1962. Oh, and remember Reggie Jackson, who was struggling, got benched in Game 5? Yeah, Reggie Jackson turned into Mr. October, hitting 3 home runs in 1 World Series game, and he also won the World Series MVP. Crazy how something can turn around just from one series to the other. The Royals and the Yankees continued their close battles in 1978. The season series went the Royals' way. The Royals, having won 102 games the year before, only won 90 games in 1978, but still finished with a comfortable 5-game lead over the California Angels. The Yankees, on the other hand, were in a dogfight in the AL East versus the Boston Red Sox. Their manager, Billy Martin, was fired in the middle of the season by the boss and replaced by Bob Lemon after saying Reggie Jackson and George Steinbrenner deserved each other. Martin said, "One's a born liar and the other's convicted." That didn't stop the Yankees from going 99-63, winning 9 more games than the Royals. But that wasn't enough to punch their ticket into the ALCS. They were tied up with Boston, which set up a game 163 at Fenway Park to see who could play the Royals. This led to a game that was infamous amongst Red Sox fans and only added fuel to their rivalry with the Yankees. A game that would be known by one name, Bucky Dent. The Yankees shortstop hit a massive 3-run home run over the Green Monster to take the lead for the Yankees, who eventually beat Boston to advance. That set up a 3rd battle between Kansas City and New York in the American League Championship Series. Game 1 went to the Yankees. They were up 4-1, and then a Reggie Jackson 3-run home run late in the game iced it for New York, who went on to win 7-1. The Royals sent Larry Gura on the mound for Game 2. Gura had not been able to get over his former team the previous 2 years, but not this time. Gura pitched into the 7th inning, only allowing 2 runs to the Yankees. The Royals, behind Gura's start, put up 5 runs early and went on to win 10-4. With the series tied at 1, both teams were heading back to New York. The Royals got off to a perfect start as George Brett led things off with a home run. Splittorff started for Kansas City, the same pitcher that caused Billy Martin to bench Reggie Jackson in Game 5 the year before. This time, Jackson got his revenge on Splittorff, and he hit a solo home run to tie the game at 1. A half inning later, Brett came up to the plate and socked another home run to put the Royals up 2-1. George Brett was not playing around this time. He did not want to lose to the Yankees again. Down 2-1, Jackson got to Splittorff and drove in Thurman Munson to tie the game. Lou Piniella followed that up with a liner to left. Jackson would score on a throwing error by Frankie Patek and give New York a 3-2 lead. Again, a half inning later, George Brett would come up to the plate and would homer again. Similar to Reggie Jackson in the '77 World Series, Brett had now homered 3 times in one game, and it was only the 5th inning. The Yankees took the lead back in the 6th inning after Reggie Jackson sac fly to center field. With a 4-3 lead in the top of the 7th, the Yankees turned the ball over to their all-star closer Goose Gossage. Gossage had just joined the Yankees, threw 100 miles an hour, and led the American League in saves. In the 7th, Gossage retired the side in order, but ran into trouble in the 8th. The Royals took the lead after an RBI single by Darrell Porter and an RBI groundout by Al Cowens, making it 5-4. Game 3 had been back and forth so far, a game that felt like 20 games in one. Thurman Munson took the lead back by hitting a clutch 2-run home run in the bottom of the 8th to put the Yankees 3 outs away from a 2-1 series lead, and the American League's best closer was still on the mound. With 1 out in the bottom of the 9th, guess who walked up with a chance to do the impossible? George Brett. George Brett dug into the box looking for his 4th home run of the game. Goose Gossage ready to deliver the pitch, and then the Royals had their backs against the wall for the 3rd straight year. To make matters worse, they had to face the American League's best starter in Ron Guidry, who led Major League Baseball in wins, ERA, and shutouts, earning him the 1978 Cy Young Award. It looked like the Royals were going to get to Guidry early after a leadoff triple by George Brett and an RBI single by Hal McRae. Dennis Leonard got the start for Kansas City. Leonard battled with Guidry all night. He gave up a solo shot to Greg Nettles in the 2nd inning and another to Roy White in the 6th inning while pitching 8. The only problem was, Guidry was 1 run better. Guidry also went 8 innings, not allowing a run after the 1st and striking out 7. Down 2-1 to the Yankees and facing elimination for the 3rd straight year, the Royals led off the 9th with a double off the Yankees Cy Young winner Ron Guidry. That prompted New York to put in their all-star closer who shut the game down the night before, Goose Gossage. That was all she wrote. Gossage shut the door and the Yankees were going to their 3rd straight World Series. Meanwhile, the Royals looked like they had no answer for the boys in pinstripes. New York went on to win their 2nd World Series in a row, becoming back-to-back champs. They had officially brought back the championship aura of the old Yankees. New York was in a new golden era. The Royals had 3 good seasons, but all 3 were soured after getting close and losing to the damn Yankees all 3 times. In 1979, it seemed like all that baseball wore both teams down as they both missed the playoffs. The Royals finished 2nd in the American League West, and the Yankees finished 4th. A familiar face in Billy Martin rejoined the team in June, only to get fired again at the end of the year.
Billy?
Yeah, George.
You were fired.
Oh, not again.
And as if the 1979 season couldn't have gotten any worse for New York, they lost their captain Thurman Munson as a result of a fatal plane crash. A blow that left many baseball fans with an empty feeling during the 1979 season. 1980 seemed to be a return to normalcy for both ball clubs. The Royals finished 97-65 with help from Willie Wilson, who was emerging as one of the game's best outfielders, and the Yankees also finished 103-59. The Royals won the season series against the Yankees, who were without Thurman Munson, Chris Chambliss, and Roy White. George Brett flirted with hitting 400 in 1980. In April, Brett was only hitting 251 and was sitting at 301 at the end of May. He later went on a 30-game hit streak, and in the 29th game, he went 4 for 4, pushing his average to 401. With 12 games left in the season, Brett was sitting at 400, and they had a series versus, you guess who, the New York Yankees. Billy Martin, in his petty ways, again with the team, told reporters that Brett wouldn't see a single fastball. George went 0 for 4 that day, and his average fell to 396, and would later finish at 390. In 518 plate appearances, George Brett would only strike out 22 times. New York hit back-to-back home runs to take an early 2-0 lead in Game 1. Kansas City answered in the bottom half with a 2-run double and took the lead with a 2 RBI single from Willie Aikens. The Royals never looked back and won 7-2. Gurra got the win for Kansas City, and Guidry struggled in the loss for New York. Game 2 was a pitching duel through and through. In the bottom of the 3rd, emerging star Willie Wilson tripled a pair for the Royals. UL Washington then doubled in Wilson to take a 3-0 lead. The Yankees didn't get started until the top of the 5th when Greg Nettles hit an inside-the-park home run. A walk then set up an RBI double for Willie Randolph to make it 3-2. The score stayed the same up until the 8th inning. Bob Watson doubled to left with 2 outs, sending Willie Randolph racing around the bases. Chasing 1 run late, Yankees third base coach sent Randolph home. It took a perfect relay to catch the speedy Randolph at the plate. In past years, the Royals bullpen had let them down. 1980 looked to be different for Kansas City with the addition of Dan Quisenberry. Quisenberry had tied with Goose Gossage for the league lead in saves in 1980. A leadoff single in the 9th inning by Reggie Jackson sent Leonard out of the game, and Quisenberry came in to close. Quisenberry would get a flyout to second, then give up a single to put runners on first and second. Greg Nettles came up with a tying run on second base, and he grounded into a double play to end the game. The Royals were one win away from finally beating the Yankees, but they had to travel to New York and find a way to get that elusive third win. In Game 3, both teams took turns early flirting with runners in scoring position. The scoring kicked off in the 5th inning as Frank White goes yard. Kansas City was up a run in the 6th inning when Reggie Jackson got to Splittorff again and hit a one-out double. This prompts Kansas City to put in their all-star closer Dan Quisenberry. Looking to get the final 11 outs, Quisenberry immediately lost the lead after an infield single and a throwing error scored Jackson. Another single with the infield halfway scored Oscar Gamble, who stood on third because of the error. All of a sudden, Kansas City started to see their chance at a World Series slowly melt away through their own mistakes. In the top of the 7th, the Yankees got 2 quick outs. Then, Willie Wilson got in scoring position by hitting a double. Similarly to the Royals, New York turned to their closer to shut down the Kansas City threat. Goose Gossage took over, but this time, the Royals were ready. Shortstop UL Washington singled to put runners on the corners for who else? George Brett. George Brett had done what he had always done and hit his team into a position to win. Would it be enough in 1980 to finally beat New York, or will the Yankees pull off yet another miraculous comeback? In the bottom of the 8th, the Yankees had something brewing. Quisenberry gave up a leadoff triple and proceeded to walk the next 2 batters. The All-Star closer found himself in a bases-loaded jam with nobody out. It looked like surely the Yankees were going to inflict some late-inning damage yet again. Rick Cerrone digs in and hits it hard at the shortstop, who was able to double up Reggie Jackson, who was too far off of second base. The next batter would ground out to second base and end the inning. Jackson, who had been the cause of many Yankee victories in the past, may have caused them one in 1980. Quisenberry set down the Yankees quietly in the 9th, and Kansas City finally slayed the Dragon. They were on their way to the World Series. The Royals would unfortunately lose the World Series in Game 6 to the Philadelphia Phillies. George Brett would famously be taken out of Game 2 because of hemorrhoids, a source of jokes and heckling from opposing fans in the years after. Just imagine, World Series, trying to get there for 3 years and you miss Game 2, or at least part of the game, because of a hemorrhoid. What are the odds? Well, this marked the end of the annual matchup between these two teams in the American League Championship Series. Over 5 years, the Royals and the Yankees would have given baseball some of the most electric playoff games we have ever seen, filled with personalities, star players that could fill storybooks for generations. Although they didn't meet again in the ALCS, the bad blood would still remain. In 1983, Billy Martin's petty ways led to one of the most memorable blow-ups ever to happen on a baseball field, as George Brett was called out after hitting a go-ahead home run for having too much pine tar on his bat. Many know about the blow-up, which Brett confirmed that he's happy he's remembered more for the pine tar incident instead of being the hemorrhoid guy. But not many know that the Royals protested this game and had it upheld by the commissioner, so they ended up winning the pine tar game anyway. And although the Royals lost the World Series in 1980, they would later return to win their first ever World Series in 1985. They came back down 3-1 versus the St. Louis Cardinals, which involved a controversial call at first base that helped the Royals win Game 6. Notable Hall of Famers involved in the great clashes between these two teams: George Brett, Whitey Herzog, Reggie Jackson, Goose Gossage, and Catfish Hunter. Before these two teams learned to hate each other, they were both lost in who they were. The Royals were trying to form an identity as a new franchise in baseball, and the Yankees looked to restore their historical greatness. Through the competition that these two teams put each other through, they both were able to accomplish greatness. Rivalries are beautiful because they bring out the best in each party. They reveal true colors and showcase individuals who have the rare ability to step up in the big moment. The rivalry between the Royals and the Yankees in the late 70s was one of the best in baseball history. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us here. If you want to subscribe, we do videos like this once every 2 weeks with also a weekly baseball show. Thank you for watching, and if you know any other forgotten baseball rivalries, be sure to leave a comment and let me know who I forgot.